Hey everybody, how you doing this Labor Day weekend? I am doing quite well because I need to break off, you know. But besides all that, I'm here to give you what I promised I said I was going to give because I feel that, like the Joker, I'm a man of my word. So, with that being said, what is this that I'm giving to you? What am I presenting? Okay, let's just start with the notion that film, whether it be in television, I mean, you know, movie theaters or whatever, that it's a medium that we all know and hopefully respect because we're fans of what it does. But here's the thing about this: we have so many genres, going from action, sci-fi, comedy, horror, and sometimes, just basic studies of, you know, the world in general. And this is what brings me to something that I feel that sometimes gets overlooked in the film media in terms of what I'm about to talk about. And that is something that deals with what goes on behind the scenes in the films that we see. Now, something that a good friend of mine, Mr. Sci-Fi Century, we was talking about this yesterday, and we was discussing something, and something came up about nature, documentaries, which I personally love myself. I love those. I grew up watching um, you know, natural. No, that's natural. It's natural. Of course, it's natural. No, I'll just say Wild Kingdom. That's I can't even say what was the insurance company that was financing that. This is the old school stuff. But basically, documentaries on wildlife and how they give their all and what they show to us as individuals. I mean, whether you're a child or an adult, and I love those stuff. But what I come to find out is that I love the fact that when we're doing behind the scenes of the films that we watch, whether it be science fiction, horror, action, drama, you get the lowdown in some degree of what these films and how they came to be brought to the universe, how they come to the surface. And this is the thing I'm talking about now. Documentaries that sometimes don't get the potential or the kind of I ain't gonna say not the respect. I mean, it to some degree, some people who actually like to give respect, but it's kind of overlooked to some point in time, and it's kind of, to me, kind of frustrating because I love knowing that the films that we grew up with, especially the ones we grew up with, get their time not just to be watched and appreciated, but those who actually put their selves out there to make these films and make them what they are today and why they become such monumental classics to us now. So, this is what is being brought about, what I'm talking about, which is documentaries of the films that are generally put out there that, as I say, sometimes some people overlook and sometimes tend to get, just kind of pushed aside because it's like, well, the films stand on their own. And they do. The films stand on their own. They always will. But again, I feel that it needs to be addressed and brought to light because if we want to appreciate something, this will keep them from fading into oblivion, and they will still stand the test of time. And I feel that that's what's necessary. So, with that being said, I just happen to have a collection of documentary videos that document certain things about certain films, or or like say one film to each the disc or whatever. Basically that's what's being said. And I think that's the thing. When you watch these films, I know from myself. I was always wondering what is the film going process. I have an imagination, just watching these things being processed, but at the same time, it's like, well, who are the people, the artists? And I'm not saying producers, directors, writers. I say artists because they are artists when it comes to painting the canvas that we see that's being presented, that flashes in our eyes, and we see it through that medium, and we get that, oh wow, that's being processed, that's what's being given to us, and that gives us the energy to just you know hyperventilate into something way bigger than we could ever imagine. So that being said, we just need to know that documentaries should be appraised and appreciated just like any other genre or medium, that films that are in theaters or television or somewhat. So to begin, let's start with just randomly, allow to say randomly talk about the documentaries that used to be done back when I was growing up, and didn't realize at the time that I would be a big fan of these things. And as time progressed, I was like, I love these documentaries of these different films. And it's crazy that I didn't know it at the time. And I guess that shows right there, know thyself to know what you really like. So going back to say way back, making me carbon date myself, back to the days when films, we didn't have internet, we didn't have all these things. We didn't have the technology we have today. Back then you had to broadcast this on television in order to get this. Or some of this stuff was actually broadcast in the theater itself, just behind little snippets behind the scenes of the films that were being made. Didn't realize that that's what they were doing, but they were doing these kind of things. And one of the documentaries that were very potent during that time were the original Star Wars trilogy behind the scenes, documentaries. And they were pretty much a catalyst to say we need to categorize and pretty much document on what's being shown here. Because basically what they were doing was showing the effects that were being done by the artists who made who, like I say, built the models. Back then, this is way before CGI and everything, where they built models, built miniature landscapes, built stop motion models, built these costumes and what's such, and different variations to bring bring the characters and bring the films to life. And one of the things I know, especially watching these, it's like, man, the man hours they put into making these things, and how it was just gratifying to watch that. And I know myself, I was just loving seeing it. It's like, oh, that's how they did this, and I would never think that that was a special effect. And I love all that technical stuff. I love all that, how it, love the BS of it, how it got made, how it got flourished, how it got come to fruition. But I know as a kid, you get older and you get realizing that I mean, as much as don't get me wrong, I love behind the scenes stuff. I love the technical aspect of how things get done. But this is where I come into the more documentary feel in terms of not just focusing on the technical aspect. What about the humanization of the people who make them? And I'm talking about, and this is where I come to say, when I say the artists, I'm talking about the actors, the writers, the directors, and even the producers, and how their field of making these films, how they got involved with these films, generated to something that they may have not thought would become, even thought of years later. But it turns out that they are far more than they ever imagined. And so this is the thing I even love more about documentaries now. It's not just that aspect, but just the emotion, the feeling of why these films get made, you know. And I feel like, that was, those documentaries back then, for the Star Wars films, the original trilogy, they were good. I enjoyed those. But I feel in me, and I'm not sure how about anyone else, I needed more than just that. I need something more to say, okay, what brought you to making these films, period? What made you want to do these kind of films? So this is why I say I have a couple of, just give you an example of what I mean, documentaries that kind of puts that out there, and it's good to know that these kind of things exist, and how I like to see more of these kind of films that we see, such as, something like, I don't know, I mean, I could just spitball any kind of film and say, we need to put that out there. In fact, I'll put one that I feel most people may not know, or they do know if you're a cult fan of typical films. This is a film that some of us in the sci-fi century name drop, the Society name drop, did a while back, and I never really seen a documentary of it, but it's a vampire film called Near Dark. And I remember when I saw this film back in the late 80s, this film, is a very unique, take on the vampirism of vampirism. The very take on vampires, period, and how they, do what they do. And I thought to myself, it would be cool if they did a documentary on this, if they did something behind the scenes and how this got made, I mean, Catherine Bigelow, was the person who directed and co-wrote the film. So it's an example of that I feel like those kind of films right there deserve to be, given those kind of treatments. But to reiterate what I'm talking about and give you an example, let's just start with what I have, just a couple of, examples, and they'll kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This is the Rodan and War of the Gargantuas DVD double pack from Classic Media, and it is a very these are classics in their own, Rodan and War of the Gargantuas. But what they have on here, which is on the Rodan's disc, is a documentary. It's an original one. It's called "Bringing." You can't see it here, or maybe you can. A little bit, yeah. Bringing Godzilla down to size. This is a good documentary on this. I mean, even though it's on a movie set, Petri Dish movie said, it's a good example of what the people behind the creation of the kaiju making process, you know, Ishiro Honda, you know, Mr. Tanaki, I'm just saying his last name, I don't want to screw up his first name, Mr. Eiji Tsuburaya, and of course, Akira Fugube. They were the four horsemen of the stuff that went down in making these films during the period of 1954 to 50 to 75, and it explains, you know uh, it shows, or should I say explains in some small detail, because it's only over an hour long. Would be nice if it was longer, but the point of it is that it's showing how just a little spark started, in which is kind of ironic because the whole genre was started by the an accident. You know, Godzilla was primarily an accident, but he was also primarily a foreshadowing of what human beings could be if they allow the testing of nuclear, materials, and what the result is through Godzilla. And surprisingly, Godzilla was supposed to be a one-off thing. But like anything in this universe, just because you make that does not mean that that's the end of that. When that seed is planted, when it is taking root and becomes pretty much sequentially basically stands on its own and becomes self-sufficient and takes on a life of its own, you can't stop that trend. There's no possibility of that happening. You can't stop it. And you see through the film, through the document. Yeah, but say film, because it is a film. Through the film, you discover that they started something that they had no idea would lead to 70 years of just incredible, amazing, just heart-stumping action and just good fashion, storytelling, and just good old kaiju, melee. And this is what the thing of the documentary brings up. I mean, yes, they get the technical side, how some things done, but they talk about what goes on during that time and what affected them during that time to make suggestions on certain things, certain aspects, and certain things that they're talking about in making these films, because they were making films out of them. It was coming out of their ass, basically. They were just making them like a factory, just spinballing, but they did it with such craftsmanship, and how the people who were involved made these films, they're involved with it, gave them life, and it's weird. It's just weird knowing how you just never know what's going to be produced and what's not going to, land. I mean, when I say what's going to land and not land is what I'm trying to say. And fortunately, it did do that, and that's a funny thing. Through them, because this basically was Toho, mostly Toho at the time, other companies started to spinball their own, films. And as we see, we got films like Gappa or Gamera, and, like I say, they took on a life of their own. So what they did contribute to something that they could never stop and no one could take away from them. All of them are long gone, rest in peace to them all. But the thing about that is they created a legacy that can never die. And this is just one example of a documentary that brings that to life, brings that to light. And I feel that that's something that documentaries like these help reiterate why we need more documentaries on films that are such a touching stone for us when we watch them, you know. And here's another example of a documentary that I feel is well made, and I love this documentary here. So it's a good 5 hour one, you know. In Search of Tomorrow, you know, this documentary pretty much talks about all, or I'm not gonna say all, but touches on the '80s sci-fi genre back in the day, back in the time when I was coming up, a little boy to a man, you know. And it's a well-made documentary because they go year by year, starting with '80 to '89, and talking about the different, pretty much the different films that were coming out at that time, and certain ones stick out the most compared to other ones, you know. And one of the great things about it is that I have three films. I have three documentaries on three of the films that are talked about in here that really bring this to, the light. But the thing I wanted to talk about is that they spent a great time discussing, you know, with the people, different, not just different, you know, performers, but they talk about say, someone, the, uh, the writer or the director, and sometimes even people who seem nonchalant, that are not so important, but they are like costume designers, you know, sound mixers, you know, art directors, stuff like that. They are very needed to be and see, we think of them as not we think of them as unimportant, but they're not. They're very important. They're super important, because without them, these films would never get made. So let me start with which ones I'm referring to, and kind of give you an idea of what I'm saying. Let's start with this one, Back in Time. It's Back in Time? Yeah, Back in Time. I'm trying to make sure I read it right. Back in Time. Now, this is a very good documentary of the Back to the Future trilogy. It goes into not just the great detail of what the films that gave us, you know, because when Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale wrote the original screenplay for the first Back to the Future, they never would have known that this film would lead to some great, you know, like, not just, you know, like, say, comic cons, you know, interacting with the actors or the actresses that were in these films, but it talks about certain festivals that they have, you know, reiterations, or how can I say, festivals that reenact certain scenes in the three films, you know. And we don't just get technical on the effects wise of the film, because like that's always going to be there, but it's more honed into what is going on, how it affects individuals individually, you know, fan wise. Because one thing about these films, fans are the ones that keep the heart and soul of these films breathing. And this documentary does a good job of doing that. Now, another one is pretty much, I tell you, one of my favorite films, you know, and I'm pretty sure it's like I say, a favorite most film favorites too, and that is cleaning up the town. It's a basically remembering the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, 1984, which is 40 years old now. This documentary, I have to say, really, I really like, for what it is, because what they do, they don't just focus on the main actors that's in this film. I mean, they deal with that, but they focus on even the smallest of character actors in the film, and which I feel that that's something overlooked in certain It's like we just focus on the main stars. We work on main, you know, characters that are the main protagonists in the films, but it's like get the little people that are in there. They're just much as important as the people who make the films. They're just as important, and it's really really amazing that a film like this hones in on also just not just that, but how the film was a creation of Dan Aykroyd's, and the original concept was not even what it is what we see in the final film. But to me, it's better for it than that, because at the time the technology wasn't available. If they were to do something on his original scale, yeah, they can do it, but would it be as good? I can say right now, me personally, I don't believe so. I feel that it would be just like a cash grab, and it's not really what it is, And I feel like that's the thing. You don't want to do something that is just a cash grab, because if that's all it is, then it's not even worth watching, in my opinion. But no, they go in minute detail about how the littlest steps bring to light what they were trying to do to make this film, because they were on a very small, I mean, it was a big budget but a very small time window in making it, and that just makes you realize that somehow some way this film is going to get made, but what's going to be the result of it? And we already know 40 years later it's still an awesome classic, and it's still entertains fans to this day. Now, for another one, for another documentary, this will be the last one, is a very good uh, documentary that was given to me, which was told to me by a friend of mine named Trio, who we call Lone Wolf, and he had mentioned it to me, and I was kind of like, I didn't realize it existed until I saw it, and that's the RoboDoc, which is a basic documentary of the original RoboCop, you know. And this one, I have to say, they really went deep with what this film was and still is, which is, it starts out, because this, like I said, this is a total 80s film, but it's set in the future, like 10 or 20 years from what was originally released in 87. And one of the things about this is, like, Paul Verhoeven, who I never heard of, was given the opportunity, and he didn't want to direct this film because it was given to other directors, but he was one of the few who seemed like to be the best choice. But he's like, I don't want to direct this crap. I couldn't care less to direct this crap. But the thing about it is, the script had things in there that caught his eye, and gave him the initiative, the narrative to say, you know what, I'll give it a try. And the thing about this film was that they had so many problems, and to me, I feel that that's the best course of any film when it has problems. Not to say that you don't want it to go easy, but if you have something that's struggling to get made, I feel that that in itself means that it's going to be something more than what you thought it was going to be. And him, they talk about, production wise, they talk about, certain people getting sick. They talk about, how the suit, the robo suit, you keep hearing different versions. Someone said it took 8 hours. Someone said it took 10 hours. Someone said it took 11 hours. Someone said it took 12. Bottom line is, it took a long time to get into the suit with Peter Weller getting into. And this film is an excellent example of how you build something up, you do something, but you never really know what's going to be the outcome. And this documentary of this film is so well put together. It's so, they break the, I mean, the one thing that I really love is not even with the effects. The effects I love, but one of the things that I really love was they deal with the sound design, how the sound design was created for this film. And me personally, that's something that I'm more in tune with than anything when watching films, is the sound of the environment around the film and how it was made. And the person who was the sound designer here, Stephen Hunter Flick, he is, like I say, he actually breaks it down and talks about how certain sounds, say for instance with you know the walking of RoboCop's footsteps, how they sound. When they show how they do that, I was like, oh wow, okay, that's pretty cool. And this is the thing that makes me realize, like, documentaries of films like this that have stand the test of time should be more a thing that should be done more often than anything. Document these things so it shows that, okay, yeah, we know about the films, we love them, we enjoy watching them, but there's more to them than just that. We want to know how and why and what was the circumstances when it comes to making these films, you know. And one of the joys of these documentaries, which I feel that I'm so glad, is they are made, they are there, they are out there. And I'm so, as a fan, glad that they're getting made slowly but surely. And I'm pretty sure there's more of them, but they're not really so much available. Some of them are pretty much in book form, which I don't mind seeing. I like to see them, but I would like to see them in film form more often than anything. But just to wrap it up, just to bring what I'm bringing up to bringing the light is everything. Documentaries, just like any other genre of filmmaking, should be a well-preserved entity in itself. And I feel that for me, and I'm hoping anyone who is a film fanatic, D, appreciates these things, because without them, they wouldn't give us that much of appreciation for what we watch. And I feel like with me personally, I'm very glad and happy that these films, these documentaries exist, because it makes me realize that somebody is paying attention. Someone is watching these things. Somebody is enduring these things and they want to watch them. And I just feel that without these films, without these type of documentaries to showcase the films that we love and appreciate, you know, honestly, I can say that the films themselves will stand the test of time, but it's the real aspect of saying that the people who have a love and a care and a compassion for what's being brought to us, they take the time to really say, hey, People made these, not, some technological whatever. I mean, even though something might have CG in it or whatever, there's still people involved. The so-called little people, they're a big hand in what makes these films what they are. And documentaries are one of the things that really brings this to light. And I can't say enough about that because it just needs to be brought to light, be aware of. And I just hope that while you watch this, you can say, I need to appreciate, seeing documentaries like that of films that if they're available, I want to watch them. Because honestly, some of the films, movies that I have now, they have somewhat of a documentary type feel, but hopefully there's more to it than just, the technical aspect. Hopefully there's something more humanistic when it comes to that. And these documentaries that I showed you are examples of that. So, but that is what I was bringing to the table, and that's what I wanted to share with you. And this is my contribution to all those who love films and who love what films bring and what we enjoy about them. So, and that's pretty much it. I mean, this is longer than I thought it was, but you know what? I had to bring this do this for myself, and hopefully you enjoy when you watch this. So, with that being said, I will close as I always do, and I always say this with such joy. Y'all always take care. Y'all be patient. And aside from anything else, keep that kaiju love alive and have a happy Labor Day weekend.